So the first question over here is, what is an aguna and what is the issue?
Okay, awesome. I'll start to explain. An aguna means a lady who is chained, who's stuck in time, freeze frame. She can't get remarried because she got married al pi halacha with the canopy, all the music, beautiful, and then her husband, Askaz, disappeared, MIA. And now has not given her a get, has not given her a piece of paper, it's a bill of divorce, al pi halacha, that allows her to freely go and remarry. That's the situation we're dealing with. In days of old, classic aguna of old was a guy lost at sea. We can't find him in war. A soldier who's MIA. We're not talking about it today. Today, that's not the 99% of agunot we're talking about are this case. We're talking about the cases where a guy willingly, intentionally wants to leave his wife. I'll mention a few quick stories just to show why is this an issue. Why do we talk about this? Why do we care? What's the big deal? Anybody here, it used to be maybe 100 years ago, 50 years ago, divorce was really uncommon. Maybe it was 1 or 2% in the Jewish population. Anybody here know anybody personally? I'm asking names. Raise your hand if you know someone who got divorced. Either a friend, family, or a relative. Absolutely. Many people.
Like 95%.
95% no. Now, the statistics are around 40% in the general American population, not Jews. 40 or 50% of marriages end in divorce. Most people don't even bother get married in America. Amongst Jews, the number of divorce is about 10%. That's the numbers statistics give. Now, maybe closer to 5%, but it's somewhere in the range. It's much more than 1 or 2%, and that's why every year, mashallah, okay, we're seeing, even in the Lakewood community, 500 marriages, and amongst the tri-state area, amongst Jewish marriages, about over 1,000 marriages at least a year. Even just in the Syrian community, we're talking about more than 200 marriages a year. And sadly, there's going to be, by statistics, whatever, just in the Sephardic Syrian community, maybe 20 divorces a year, and it happens. A rejecter has been a Masada Gittin for 30 years, over 3,000 Gittin, about 100 a year, in the Newark, New Jersey area of non-Sephardim, Ashkenazim. That happens. By statistics, about 10%, there's a lot of divorces happening. How many of them ended terribly? That statistic is much lower than the original statistic. That's probably less than 1%. But it's still absolutely a real number. It still is a real number. Of divorces, the numbers are given about 5% divorces. How many, okay, we said basically 95% of people raise their hand for divorce. Anybody know of a couple who got divorced? It was a messy divorce, meaning a divorce that took more than 1 year, or there was a custody battle, or more than 1 year they were fighting over things. Fighting over kids, fighting over money and estate. Not 95% of the hands, but a few hands. Those are maybe 5, 10%, maybe even by some books, it's 20% they say of the marriages end in a very messy marriage. Whatever the number is, this is a real number. Two stories, disasters. 1996, Belima Zitrenbaum, 7 kids in Muncie. Her husband was beating her up, 7 kids, okay? They were married for a bunch of years, 10 years, and her husband beat her up so bad she was steeped in blood Saturday morning. She called the cops, and the husband already left her. She got an order of protection against her husband. The husband didn't come back. He was a drug addict and stealing and all sorts of problems. This Belima was in a coma because her husband came to the house to beat her up. She was in the hospital for a few weeks. She survived. She wanted a get. She wanted a divorce. A guy who beats her up to half to death seems right. She deserves to get. No, the guy disappeared. He tried to kill her, even against the order of protection. The police didn't stop her. She wasn't killed, but she lived as an aguna for about 20 years. She died as an aguna, never able to get remarried. Sad, horrible story. Stuck and tied to this sick man. A different extremist story. This one's very, very famous. 1995, Avraham Rubin married only 4 years, 2 kids, Montreal, to a lady, Chaya. Okay, 2 years for 4 years married. They decide she moves out of the house. Marriage is not working. Okay, 2 years. It takes them to get a civil divorce. Fine. After 4 years, she says she needs a get. She wants to get remarried. He was married at 27. At 31, they got divorced. She was married or whatever, mid-20s, 4 years later, upper 20s, 29. She wants to get remarried. Okay, in this case, they feel bad, right? So they agree to go to some Beit Din originally, maybe in Borough Park. He didn't trust the Beit Din. He said they're biased. They wouldn't go one time, 2 times. After the Beit Din decided he had to give the get, this is what it says in Rambam and Rabbeinu Hananel, an old Sarim, is Kofin B'Shotim. They take out the stick and they beat him. Now, this is not what we do in America, but somebody involved in the Beit Din, October of 96, decided they brought him in the middle of the night, they drugged him, they tied him up in the cemetery, they broke every rib in his body, and other parts of his body were attached to electric prods, and they had a get by the next morning. They found him all bloodied and beaten up in the cemetery. The cops found him in the morning. And some rabbis in Borough Park were making a big deal, controversy. The get is batel, it's invalid. They beat him to a pulp. He didn't willingly give it. The Montreal community was so the Montreal community. Sorry, I'm getting 2 stories mixed up, but okay, Borough Park community. So the bottom line, whatever. This caused a big controversy. The Montreal story I really want to say was a lady was married and her husband said, "Give me $120,000 to get a get." Okay, the one case I know of personally, someone a very messy divorce, they asked for money, tens of thousands of dollars, and most rabbis at this point say, just do it, give in. Better than a messy divorce, just give in extortion, give in a lot of money. Now, I don't know if that's a good idea, but that's what so she raised money from Montreal, from her community, $120,000, and the guy said, "I don't trust that you're going to give it to me after I give the get. You're going to retract. So put in escrow." No, don't put in escrow. Give it to me. So they gave him the money, and then before he gave her, they wrote the get. Before he put it in her hand, or the shliach, before he delivered the get, he said, "No, I'm actually not doing it. I was under duress. I'm not giving the get." And then they beat him up later. And then that's the end of the story. And that was the question of whether or not it was a good get. Because of these horrific stories, and someone, March 2nd, this year, someone wrote an article of 3 different stories in Jerusalem Post. I'm not going to read the stories now. Much more toned down stories. But this is the why. Why do we care about this? Is because there's horrible stories of women all the time that are stuck in bad marriages, of broken things, and she wants to move on with her life, and she's stuck because halacha of a get. And I don't believe in the feminists that their solutions, we want to undo Torah marriage, or we have to other the halachic solutions. I think there's the real better solution. That's why I'm here today to discuss this.
Right,
that's
that March
why.
2nd article was coming from a place of, you guys, we know the halacha better than you rabbis do. You could have done this. How come you guys are so politically corrupt and you don't do this? But we can at least try now in advance to try to fix things. And we have a solution on the books, and that's what we want to talk about today, of a halachically sound solution that is crafted under the guidance of Gedolei Hador, the greatest dayanim in the world, with zero exaggeration to that effect. And that's really the idea, is we have an idea, we have a solution, and everyone should do it, and there's good reason for it, so that we don't have these stories anymore.
Absolutely. Okay, so, and these are now 1 or 2, by my statistics, this is happening. The small fraction of the guys who are, again, refusing to give a get for more than 5 years or more, it happens every year. There's a handful of people, but it adds up. So over the year, there's several people, dozens and dozens of people, and each community has faced this problem. Right, we're going to take more questions to try to tackle this topic to understand what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Judah, you want to ask? Judah is going to ask.
That covers 2. Let's move to question 3.
All right. So does the current Beit Din system have enough teeth to deal with the agunot issues? And if not, what can be done to restore this?
I was contacted a few months ago, the Friday morning before Rosh Hashanah. Whenever Rabbi Jachter calls me on a Friday, it means that I have to be ready to drop everything and run. Because you never know if there's a guy he's been working on getting to give a get for the past 6 months, and he just said yes, so we're going to do the get today before he changes his mind. So I get a phone call on a Friday, the Friday before Rosh Hashanah this year, And Rabbi Jachter says, I have a case for you to take, a case in the Persian community, and I want you to take care of it. It's all yours. Go. So basically what happened was a couple was married for a very short period of time, and it fell apart for whatever reason. It's not to share publicly. And the husband decided he doesn't want to give his wife a get. Just long story short. Rabbi Elbaz and I convinced him to give a get. He said yes. We're going to do it on the Motzei Shabbat before Rosh Hashanah. And I was beside myself. This guy's a Kohen, therapy, yes, no, maybe, try things out, whatever. Motzei Shabbat, we canceled the get. And then they were going to go for therapy. It never happened. And then that's it. We need to have a get. The wife is like, he's not giving me a get. We need to do this. I keep on trying to call him. He blocks my phone number. I call him with my Google Voice number. He blocks my Google Voice number. And this guy is not interested. He's not working. He's not helping. Nothing I can do. So we start looking into communal pressure options, talking to the rabbis. Very complicated situation. We don't hear anything for a couple months. And then lo and behold, the guy took his wife to Rav Chaim's Beit Din. They're writing a get today. And I'm like, Baruch Hashem, amazing, wonderful, hooray. They get to the Beit Din and he changed his mind. Forget it, no get. I called him on the phone. He's like, sorry, I don't want to do it anymore. 2 more months pass. He's not interested in giving his wife a get. There's extortion. There's shaming. There's whatever. And then, long story short, Rabbi Ben Chaim was able to get involved at the right time and convince this guy to give his wife a get. There was nothing I could do to force him to come. This woman was an aguna. And there are organizations that are created. ORA, the Organization for Resolution of Agunot. There's the Lev from Brooklyn and Deal. There's Vad Linyane Igun in New Jersey. There are various organizations that are trying to help to create circumstances that could help bring a husband to the table. But really, there's in America where there is no jurisdiction of the Batei Din, and we really have nothing that we can do. And in Eretz Yisrael, where the Rabbanut is in charge of marriage and divorce, they have a lot more power, but even that is not enough. So we definitely need more help. It's for sure in America and the Rabbanut in its own way, but that's not what we're talking about today. We definitely need more help in taking care of this because we waste so much time, money, resources on these things, and the Beit Din is simply not in a position to force anything to happen.
Absolutely, I can't agree more. There are, wondrous stories where a rabbi or a Beit Din is able to get the right solution for the couple, where they pressure the husband or whatever it may be, but it's rare. Very often doesn't happen. Rabbi Willig had it in 1988, where a guy wasn't giving a get, just recently married, a young couple that just got divorced, and wouldn't give a get to his wife for 2 years, and he says he can't come into the synagogue anymore, not welcome. And then he goes to a different synagogue down the block, same thing, the rabbi bars him from coming to the synagogue. And then a third synagogue. So then he can't go to any of them where he lives in Riverdale. And eventually the pressure, and that still didn't make a difference, it was the secular judge made a difference in the state. He's going to lose 5% of his estate. Okay, that made him give the get. But a lot of times it doesn't work. Rabbis convincing people to give a get. Sadly, our Beit Din system is a little bit, broken a little bit. If we lived in a small community of Aleppo 200 years ago, or you live in a small community in Ashkenaz or anywhere in the world, in Persia, wherever it may be, and there was understood communal pressure that you're not going to go find a second wife where you're leaving your first wife in Aguna and doing some horrific thing to her, it would be understood. You wouldn't be able to get away with it so much. People didn't travel very much. Word spread quick enough that it was a close enough knit community. You couldn't get away with it. Today, that our world, has exploded. Okay, we have many Ashkenazim, Sephardim, religious people, and these problems creep up all the time. And there's not a good solution with our Beit Din system because there's nothing forcing anybody to go to any Beit Din. And if they don't like this Beit Din, what are you going to do? They're not going to go. They're going to try to go to some other Beit Din.
Or they can just get divorced civilly and leave it alone. It's
a major problem. So this is an issue not just for the random, crazy, extreme cases, but all the cases that happen all the time. Anybody have any general questions before we keep going on this list? We have more questions to tackle over here. Okay. Let's go. Keep going.
Should Jewish...
Yeah, whatever. We'll start and then we'll go back. Yeah.
Should Jewish communities advocate for secular laws that deal with get refusals, and why?
My opinion is absolutely not, but I'll leave it to the expert.
The Gemara tells us that a get given under duress, a husband has to write a bill of divorce and put it in his wife's hand. If he does it under duress, it would be a get batel. It would be an invalid get. We want the get to work. Anyone who tries to force a get in a way that is not halachically sound is wasting his time and just fooling himself and leading to mamzerim as well. So the Gemara tells us at the end of Masechet Gitin that if the Beit Din determines that a person is obligated to give his wife a get, and the goyim get involved and say, do what the Beit Din says, Aseh Masha Yisrael Omerim Lecha, if it's already a case where we've determined a due process that he's chayav to give a get, it requires due process, then okay. But if there was no due process, or if the goyim just of their own volition say, hey, in this country you can't get divorced without giving your wife a get, go give your wife a get, and that's meaningless. Not only is it meaningless, it's under duress. The guy is here under a court order because the goyim told him to be here. So we have to be so careful when it comes to legislation that requires the giving of a get that we not enter a state of duress. There's the sugya of isui begitin get me, who says insanely complicated.
Yes.
And requires the biggest guns available to entrust public officials to be able to be postekei hadur is simply irresponsible.
Good. And there are two New York get laws that get involved with this. They're problematic for our perspective in terms of forcing a husband to give a get because they're going to penalize him in secular court is very problematic in terms of a get because that's not what the get system is supposed to be. Like Rabbi Djavaheri said, the Gemara in Gitin Peichet and Kuf Lamedal and Shulchan Aruch, it has to be given by the guy's free will, and the goyim are beating him up or telling him they're going to throw him in jail. That's not a valid solution. It comes out the get will be invalid. So that's not a great solution for us at all. Yes?
There's like a side of the machloket that those, like nowadays, the way that we get the husbands to give their gets, like I feel like there should be a side to say that is considered duress, and then it is pasul, and then you're dealing with a woman who's sleeping with her would be safek eshet ish.
Okay, good.
Shouldn't we be?
So the solutions that any Beit Din does today are all valid. According to Rambam, there are certain cases where very rarely, but if the husband really is, according to the Ramah, let's say beating his wife, according to the Ramah, the Beit Din is allowed to beat him up to tell him to get divorced. He doesn't want to get divorced, he'll beat him up. And according to Shulchan Aruch, according to Chol Vadia, you can't beat him up. You just tell him he has to get divorced. Okay? He doesn't listen. We have no choice. We can't beat him up. But nowadays in America, we don't beat up anybody. That's not going to work. So social pressures is fine. We'll talk about the solution of the prenup. Are all acceptable halachic solutions? Yeah, it's pressure. It is pressure. But it's pressure when deemed appropriate by a Beit Din, not as a secular court, by a Beit Din. When a Beit Din tells us that's the right thing, then the Rambam is famous. The Rambam is famous that when they beat up a person, according to the right circumstances, the right case, he's giving it willingly. What do you mean he's giving it willingly? He's crying that they're beating him to a pulp. The answer is, in his really neshama, his Yitzhar Tov wants to go do it. He wants to do the right thing, but he has some Yitzhara that's blocking him from doing the right thing. So because of that, what do? We beat him up to remove the Yitzhara, so now the Yitzhara is not getting to him, and now he gives it willingly. Perek Bet in Girushin Halachach. Obviously, that is a idea, but that's how the halacha works when it comes to this. So basically, when it's orchestrated by Beit Din, it's allowed, but not when it comes from a secular place.
But it still requires reaching the level, the threshold of mitzvah or chiyuv legaresh. A woman who says, I want to get divorced because you're not being nice to me, I want to go do whatever, you're not letting me, it hasn't reached that threshold yet. So, they're fighting about money, fighting about chinuch, it hasn't reached the threshold yet of we can beat him up. That requires real severe things. Now, someone who who refuses to give his wife a get for not the severe things, and then is pressured socially to give his wife a get, usually that's when you see the billboards saying these rabbis are bringing mamzerim into the world, and has a picture of Rav Shechter and Rav Willig and other great rabbis who are involved in the case. these people don't know in Meforash Shulchan Aruch that if you force a get, that's when you see these pictures and these billboards, and it's usually the angry party that doesn't know Shulchan Aruch and how to employ it, that is funding these smear campaigns. That said, the campaigns that go to pressure need to be done with proper halachic guidance to make sure. We can never force somebody to give a get. We can't say, I'm going to fire you from work unless you give your wife a get. We can say, I'm going to fire you from work for being a bad guy, but I'm willing to forgive you if you give your wife a get. We'll put you in jail in Israel for not paying your taxes because you took cash under the table, but we're willing to let you go if you just give your wife a get. We'll fire your mother from her job until she convinces you to give you a get. But we're never going to fire you from your job. We have to be very careful in how we articulate the pressure because it could render it null and void. And of course, that is a very big concern, which is why it requires, again, proper dayanim and batei din to be involved. Even Ora acts as the shoterim. We are the shofetim. We tell them what to do in this case, and they're the shoterim, and they go out, shofetim shoterim titan lacha, they go out and they figure out, based on what we said, how they can protest and how they can engage in public pressure to get a guy to give a get.
Okay, I guess moving on to the next question. Number 5,
Aside from a prenup, is there any solution for modern agunot that are trapped?
Daven, that he die. That's the best way. That's the best way. The guy is such a menuval that he's not giving his wife a get. Avinu Malkeinu, Shishlach, Meheira, Maka, Nora'a, She'amita Tomiyad, and then you're good to go. Chacham Avadia did that when there was a real aguna whose husband was a vegetable and couldn't get a get. He couldn't give her a get. So Chacham Avadia met with him. He was in a hospital bed. He couldn't move. Prayed. The minyan. They walked out and he died. Now, we're not on that madriga, but one day, hopefully, for the people who need it, we can. But in the meantime, we can have a collective tefillah of Klal Yisrael to engage, because people who are like this are so cruel. For whatever reason, they're being cruel. This cruelty is achsariyut, is simply intolerable. We cannot let it exist in our community.
A similar story. The chidah, someone came, a problem with the husband and wife, and then he said, "There's 2 ways. Isha koneh asma b'shnei drachim. There are 2 ways: either you give a get or mital habal." He said, "I don't want to give a get." So he was walking out of the chidah's room. He said he refused to listen to the rabbi. He fell down the stairs and he died. Okay, so some people like that. You have the story. You have the Bava Sali stories. You have certain gedolim you don't want to mess with. Okay, that's a different pressure.
That was a tzaddik nistar.
Okay.
I was not afraid.
I would say a different solution is we use the communal pressures, like not allowing someone into the synagogues. Right? Willig had a case where he didn't allow the person's nephew into a school because of not giving a get. Those are rare, and sometimes that type of pressure does work. There was some principal of a school that was not giving a get, and the whole
son wasn't giving a get.
Son wasn't giving a get. Oh yes, and that because of big public protest of we put things online on Instagram, and everybody knows about it. It smears the name, so then they end up giving a get. That does happen sometimes, but it doesn't always work. But that is a different solution. Sometimes public pressure. Besides, we're going to talk about the prenup.
Sometimes
Most of the other things are very inconsequential. We have good ideas, but they don't work. It's just there's just problem after problem. One story was there was someone in 2016, 5 kids, and the husband was abusive, and she wanted a divorce, and the husband left. She got a restraining order. Nothing. 10 years later, she's still asking for a get, and she can't even find him. Doesn't know if he's alive or dead. That's the type of situations we're dealing with, where we often don't have a good solution.
I would point out that sometimes people think that, look, you're Sephardic, this doesn't matter. You're in a Sephardic community, this is not going to be a problem. Because in the Sephardic communities, for example, in the Syrian community and the Mashadi community, they're so tight-knit and everyone's related to each other that anyone who refuses to give a get is costing himself his entire social stature by not giving his wife a get, because everybody knows and everybody's in everybody's business and everyone is all over everybody, and therefore the communal pressure is so great that no one would ever not get, no one ever get divorced, because that would be a huge shame, and humiliation for them.
Right.
And number two, if it really comes to it, they would do it without a fight because their whole social structure would crumble in front of them at a cost. I would say that's not always true. It really depends on how affiliated the person is. If the person is not as deeply affiliated, I dealt with a case just this past few months, a person from our area who was married in another continent to a woman from another continent, and he just left her there and came here, back home. And he didn't give his wife a get, and his wife is not that, doesn't care that much, frankly. So the rabbi was fighting to get this woman a get. And the rabbi is saying that we need to get this woman to get ASAP. It's not appropriate for a woman to be walking around half single, half not. And the husband said, "Well, when all these Tanaim, when the legal is over, da 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 da." And I told the rabbi, the husband, like, "Can we just get a get already? Like, what's taking?" So he said, the moment all the legal is over, this guy is giving a get, and he's going to lose all of his communal structure. And we told him, we threatened him. He's going to lose his entire community if he doesn't give a get the moment the civil is over. And kachaya, the rabbi told him, and it happened. That guy was at the leash of his rabbi.
Right.
Not everybody is. So just because your skin is darker, your hair is darker, and maybe you speak another language, doesn't mean that this problem doesn't exist in your community. It very much does. If you look on the Ora website, I think half or a third of the me'agenim, the husbands refusing to give their wife a get, are Sephardi. So it exists everywhere. And community helps when there's a community structure that's really binding, but otherwise it doesn't help at all.
Is it a long process to actually get signed by the husband?
It takes 1 hour.
The process of the get is not very complicated at all.
Peanuts. Happy to do it in my sleep. And I'll wake up at 3 in the morning. If a husband's not willing to do it otherwise, I'll do it in my sleep. But that's not the problem usually. The problem is before that. Okay. Let's move on. Time is short. We got to move to the prenup. Let's go.
So, what are the halachic problems with the prenup, and are there solutions to these problems?
What is the prenup?
Okay, let's go back. What is the prenup? The prenup, on the other side of this sheet, with the questions, is an excerpt of the two main pieces of the prenup. And I strongly feel it's a very, very positive thing to sign before you get married. They used to have signs up, and one of the signs was like, friends don't let friends, whatever, do drugs. Friends don't let friends get married without a prenup. Why? I think it's a moral obligation. It's a good thing. It means you care about your spouse not just because you want to have a one-night stand or you just want to have fun. It means it's a serious marriage. The same thing we do with ketubot. So there's two parts. The first one is actually not really having to do with the marriage directly, but is the more important one actually. It just says if should a dispute arise between the parties, so you should not live together as husband and wife. They're not living in the same house. They're not living together. They agree to submit to binding arbitration. Now, in theory, someone could put a different Beit Din. It doesn't have to be Beit Din of America. You can pick a different Beit Din. But it should be a Beit Din that you're comfortable with and trust. Now, why is it so important? The reason this is so important is because if you don't have this clause, what happens? That people fight and fight and fight so much that they don't even agree on the Beit Din, they don't agree on anything, and it comes out that they never get anything. They don't get anywhere. And that's the problem why we need to have arbitration agreement that we're agreeing from the beginning. We're going to go to one Beit Din. Otherwise, you can beat around the bush and it'll take 10 years and get nowhere. Everybody will say, I want this Beit Din is pasul, they went to college, this Beit Din is biased towards men, this Beit Din is a feminist Beit Din, I'm not going anywhere, and they never get anywhere. Therefore, you have to agree to a Beit Din up front. And that actually is more important than anything else we're going to say. The support obligation, it's the third section, that's the crux of what the prenup is. It says the husband agrees, I obligate myself to support my wife to be, according to the requirements of Jewish law governing the Jewish husbands. Okay, that means I'm going to take care of what says the ketubah. Good, I'll take care of that. Furthermore, I hereby now obligate myself in a manner that I cannot exempt myself of any claim of smachta. It's not identical to what it says in the Torah. There's in addition to that. Now, they may overlap and they may be the same most of the time. But the following, I take upon myself a claim to support my wife to be from the date of our domestic residence. Once it's the domestic residence together shall cease, whatever reason, at the rate of $150 per day. Okay, and then it continues. The basic idea is mizonot, support of his wife. They're married. As long as he hasn't given her a get, they're married, and he owes her a mizonot. He owes her $150 a day. Where did $150 come from? Basic investigation. I could show you that one day. We'll go over the economic report basically to come up with the money. The way to come about it is how much does it cost rent by average? How much does it cost to live normally with food and everything else with insurance, with paying communal dues and whatever it is to live normally? $150 a day is on the lower end of things today, but you can get by probably in some communities with $150 a day, and it depends by zip code, no question about it. That's what the prenup is. Djavaheri, do you want to answer this question? What are the problems?
Problems with the prenup that people were concerned about in the beginning was that, number one, this is an asmachta. An asmachta is a commitment to something that will take place on a condition that is beyond my control. How can I control if I win the game of dice? The whole problem with gambling. How can I control the gamble? How can I commit myself to paying this money should my marriage fall apart? That was a concern of asmachta. Rabbi Sultan is going to address the asmachta issue at the right time. Some complained that the $150 a day was way too much. That's called a kinas. That's called a punishment. We don't want to start punishing people, then that's called duress, and the get would be invalid. Others argue that a self-imposed kinas would be invalid according to the Rashba. And others said that this is from YU, so it's taref. You can't get involved with things from YU or treif. It's modern Orthodox. Hashem Yirachem. It's not apid the Gedolei Yisrael. We want to be like the Goyim. You want to be like the Goyim. It's modern Orthodoxy. We don't want that in our world. We don't want to have a chashash of mamzerut. These are all some of the problems that were raised. Should I address some of them?
I'll try to address them and go back.
Go for it, yeah.
The prenup, Rabbi Willig started in 1991. By the way, the pizza is coming. It's just delayed. In 15 minutes, we're going to get the pizza. We'll have the lunch then. 1991, Rabbi Willig saw there's a big problem. He went to Chomovadia. He went to several other big gedolim. Some of the great gedolim, to find a solution to this problem. Because this problem, Ora says they get about 150 calls a year of people who have agunah problems, that they're married for 5 years, 10 years with no get. The woman wants to get remarried, she's in her 30s, 20s, and can't get remarried. So if it's 150 in the New York, New Jersey area, we're seeing 150. It definitely happens in Israel. It definitely happens here. It's a tremendous amount of cases that are a problem. So he got a signature from Chomovadia. 1991 and 1992 in blue ink, and I've seen the original. I felt it. I touched it. I've taken a picture of the original copies.
Well, somebody told us that was fake.
There's a whole book of the crusades against Rabbi Willig. Now you should know who supports this. Chomovadia supported it in his day. In America, there's many. There's Rabbi Gedaliah Schwartz, Rabbi Eliezer Meir Tait, Rabbi Elio Ben Chaim, Rabbi Shmuel First. Rabbi Shmuel First had a comment 5 years ago saying, when it came out in the 90s, the yeshivish movement said, we can't do anything to do with changing halakha, anything to do with YU, anything to do with modern. We don't want to do with that. Bad idea. We don't need it. Agunot are not a problem. We brush under the carpet. This problem is not our problem. He said, 30 years later, we realized they were right. This problem does exist. Now, this book is about Agunot in the 1800s. They have all the funny cases of people who ran away from their husbands, craziest cases. They have a Zalman Mamshewitz. He married one woman in one community. He moved to the next community, got married however long he wanted for a few months. He left her. He had 6 wives in 6 different communities, none of them with a get, until he finally got to London. The police actually arrested him for that. That's in the 1800s, and there was always problems with Agunot, but it was few and far between because it didn't get the press. There was a small enough community that were able to solve most of the issues. Anyway, so who agrees with this? We said Rav David Cohn, Rabbi Schechter, Rabbi Feivel Cohn, Rabbi Eliyahu Abergel, these are in Eretz Yisrael. Okay, in my opinion, there are many others who are on the side of this. Don't say so explicitly. Rabbi Shalom Asas, Rabbi Shlomo Amar.
Rav Meshash wanted, when he was the chief rabbi of Morocco, to institute a prenup of his own for the Moroccan community. that would be required for everybody getting married. Rav Meshash's prenup was halachically inferior to this prenup. It required a self-imposed penalty, which would violate what the Rashba says would be a get under duress, but he felt Rav Meshash, one of the Gedolei Hador, Chief Rabbi of Morocco, Chief Rabbi of Yerushalayim, Chaver Tova, Chacham Vadia Yosef, Rav Meshash felt it was worth it to be lenient against the Rashba in order to save Agunot. Rabbi Willig's prenup is a million times better because the $150 self-imposed obligation is not a penalty for not giving a get. It's an extension of the husband's requirement to be mefarnes his wife, to offer her mizonot, to give her, food and sustenance. And even if she's no longer living at home, which at that point the halacha ends the obligation, the husband, before the marriage, prenuptially committed himself to continue supporting her even past that obligation. And what would make sense, given the standard, the living index, everything in America, in the New York area, for an Orthodox Jewish family, that would be about $150 a day. So Rabbi Willig's is a million times better than Rav Meshash's. So alachat kama vechama, Rabbi Shalom Esas would appreciate and go 100% for the prenup of Rabbi Willig.
Yeah, so this book, there was a Rabbi Spiro who wanted just to smear this prenup. So he said, none of the Gedolim said it. It's against the halacha. And he tried to quote everybody who's against it. And he said, now, I think most of the sources are totally misunderstood, and doesn't present the case very fairly, misunderstood the prenup. I think that's the real problem. But also, Chamavadi never signed as a forge. And he said, besides it being a forgery, no one signed it. Someone made up this for his signature, which is absolutely not true. It's a whole sentence. Chamavadi wrote in his handwriting. We know that. Besides that, Ray Willig saw it. Only 30 years ago he saw it. Besides that, they say, it was forged, and they tricked Chacham Ovadia about what he was signing, and that's why when they tried getting Chacham David to sign, he refused to sign. And when they tried to get Chacham Yitzchak Yosef sign, and his two sons to sign, a big chief rabbis to sign, they would refuse to sign because they knew that Chacham Ovadia's thing couldn't be real. It was all forged and all thing. Now, and they say Rav Amar was against it, and Rav Amar wrote a letter to Rabbi Willig, says, Lo Yidvar Me'olam, the whole thing's a lie and a sham. Chacham Ovadia was not against it. On paper, and I don't know anything otherwise, people who've spoken to Rav Cham Davin or Yitzchak Yosef, they don't want to get involved with this question, but they're not saying they're against their father. They're not saying the whole thing was a fraud. That's a big mistake. The people who say he got confused, they're making it up. They made up a whole plot against the prenup, so they have to convince even the good guys, the Cham Ovadia, he couldn't possibly agree with this. Rav Asher Weiss also signed on with it. Many, many big rabbis signed on with it. Are there those who disagree? Yes, Rav Elyashiv had a question with it, and he wasn't ready to sign it. He didn't say it was pasul gamrei, but he had a question. Rav Sternbach, he was have it against it. His son-in-law made a whole kuntris to fight it. Everybody, Rosh Zalman, Stipler, everybody was against it. The problem is they weren't alive when this was coming out. So like some of the signatures against the prenup don't really make too much sense in some of those kuntrisim. What are the main issues? Just really quick.
To clarify, Rosh Zalman, when Rav Willig approached Rosh Zalman, Rosh Zalman said, Lech le dayanim. So which dayan did he go to? He went to Rav Zalman Nechemia Goldberg, the Garzen, Rav Gaon Rabbi Zalman Nechemia Goldberg, who was literally, without an ounce of exaggeration, one of the greatest
his son-in-law. That was
one of the greatest dayanim on the planet Earth, who was Rosh Zalman's son-in-law.
Yes.
And he signed on with it because it was his idea.
Yes.
It was his idea, and he published in Yeshurun or whichever journal. And Rabbi Willig took that idea and he employed it in creating the prenup. And then between him and Rav Simbalis, who was also one of the greatest dayanim in the Rabbanut at the time, together they crafted this prenup with a lot of back and forth. And then some rabbi had the audacity to tell us, and in front of Rabbi Willig, why didn't you go to other rabbis? And Rabbi Willig is like, you idiot. These were the greatest rabbis. Where were you? You weren't there. Oh, you didn't go to this rabbi. That guy was a nothing. These were the biggest guns available, and they all signed off on it 100%. Now, Rav Amar wrote a teshuvah saying the prenup is good. Rav Elyashiv told Rav Feivel Cohen that the prenup is not going to ruin the marriage, and it's not going to ruin the get. We wouldn't advise it. It's not for our people. It's not for our camp. Rav David Cohen and Rav Feivel Cohen didn't want to endorse it because they felt their community didn't need it, and they were wrong. And because of that, their community now has the Yashar initiative, which is a neutered down, watered down version of the prenup. There are more words on the page, but it doesn't accomplish as much as Rabbi Willig's prenup. in terms of feeling confident, Rabotai, no one in here is like, this is not a college campus where we go around asking you to blindly sign, a petition, and to protest against the genocide in Palestine. This is your marriage. This is your wife's marriage that we're trying to ensure that you are properly prepared, that we are not just for you, but for the other guy who will mess over his wife, that she should be safe if everybody signs a prenup before he gets married.
Okay.
Now, in terms of it,
I apologize. I didn't get to the real crux of the issues. There are three. One of them is when we pick the Beit Din, who said that's binding? There's a well-known rabbi, who said he doesn't think it's binding, and I'm happy to discuss the details. But I think from many examples in Shulchan Aruch, when you sign a document saying I'm going to this Beit Din, it's absolutely binding. I'll show it in my paper. I have 24 pages in Hebrew to explain it. But that's one topic. Another bigger topic is asmachta. There's a penalty clause you usually cannot agree to as Sephardim. Usually we say it's null and void. However, when it comes to this, it's not considered null and void. First of all, because you say it is a kinyan, we make an acquisition over this. I would say it's in Beit Din Chashuv, an important Beit Din. We did from now. According to a lot of Achronim, Rishonim, that works as it is. That's more or less what we're relying on. Now, it is possible for Sephardim to add other language that would change it around, but fundamentally, that's what we assume. It's not exaggerated. That's not a smachta. It's not a penalty. It's manzonot. He owes her for the support of the marriage. The biggest one is get musai. He shouldn't force the marriage. He shouldn't force him to give a get. On that, we have two main reasons. One is it's mizonot. Yitzchak wrote to Rivka her ketubah, Yitzchak Avinu, that he gives her shnei gidei ezim, 2 goats every single day. She needs to have a shawarma every single day. No, Rivka didn't need that, but he decided to give her a nice, wealthy ketubah with a lot of presents. Beautiful. So that's what we're doing with this. We're giving her a possibility of having support of $150 a day, and that's not crazy. $150 is basically what you need to have a basic life. So therefore, it's not getting musaf for that reason. That's found in the Tashbeit, it's found in Rishonim and Achronim, Beit Meir. That's really what they do in Israel very often, is they slap on the guy to have a support obligation if they're married and not giving a get. That's one piece of it. Also, the Ramah quotes the Ikar Adin is like the Tashbeit, who disagrees with the Rashba, that if a kanas is self-imposed, someone agreed to himself, not was forced by anybody else, that's considered willing, not considered forced. There are many other arguments I have in here to explain it.
Gentlemen, which of you would appreciate sitting in front of Chacham Avadia Yosef right now? My Rabbi Rav Eliyahu ben Chaim was sitting in Parat Yosef as a 16-year-old, and he remembers so vividly that Chacham Avadia was visiting, and he gave a shiur on Hilchot Chanukah, and he was rattling off all the Rishonim and all the Acharonim, and everybody was like... Only Chacham Ben Zion was paying attention, and some rabbi troublemaker was making trouble. Gentlemen, this is worth it. This is worth it. I know you don't know the Tashbetz by heart, but it's worth it. It's worth it to focus, because you'll regret it in 30 years from now that you didn't focus. Now, just to respond, follow up, all the things Rabbi Sultan is saying are not chidushim of his own. There are points that many others have made in the past. So wait, how come there are still rabbis who are obsessed with attacking and disagreeing with the prenup? For seemingly halachic reasons, there's a teshuvah in Teshuvot B'Hanagot of Rav Sternbach against the prenup. The answer is they're either misinformed or misaligned. Misinformed, meaning they did not have the proper context of what it says in the prenup and what it's accomplishing. And therefore, they just wrote a teshuvah based on what they were fed. But if Rav Sternbach's teshuvah started off assuming that it was a penalty, then the whole assumption throws the teshuvah in the garbage and it's not Torah. And when Rabbi Willig went in 2014 to Rav Sternbach's house and had a private meeting with him and his sons and Rabbi Willig's sons and Rav Tzvi Gartner, who was one of the Gedolim of the world of Get Me'useh, and they explained everything to him and said, he said, you are right. He just wasn't willing to sign on a piece of paper. Then we know that there's no value. But unfortunately, people look in the Sefer Teshuvah V'Hanagot and they say, look, Rav Sternbach says there's a Chashuv Tamei Chacham in this country who saw what it says in Teshuvah V'Hanagot and wrote an essay echoing the same words. But we know that the first one was garbage, so we know his words are garbage too. He's a wonderful person. But the words are a mistake, and it stays a mistake.
I'm happy to go through the details maybe more another time, but why Rabbi Sternbach said what he said and why Rabbi Lebhar said what he said, and why I think there's very clear, reasonable reasons why the prenup is acceptable Rabbi Harold Sutton also supports it. He said he was on a conference telling the Sephardi Rabbanim that we should do it because it solves these problems. We have major problems, and it's necessary. It's a necessary thing. It's a moral thing to do, and it cuts down the issue. 99%. It has almost never been proven wrong. It solves the issues. The technical halachic details, whatever we didn't do now, we'll do in the next week. Yes, questions? Yeah.
If the prenup's whole objective is to force the guy's hand into giving a get, I mean, $150 per day I'm not saying that it's going to be effective for a lot of people, but that doesn't sound so foolproof, of course, because if somebody has like a lot of money, like $1 million, and for them, they might be so upset at the situation that they're willing to go that far to like spend $30,000 a year.
Right. You're saying that if some people are so cruel and twisted and have the means that they don't mind, okay, so it's a business expense. I'll go find a way to marry another wife. We're paying $150K for a heter rabbanan, and I'll leave this woman with her $300 a day and Shalom Yisrael. $150 a day and Shalom Yisrael. Yeah, the prenup is not a master lock, a master key. It's not going to solve every problem.
Is it possible to sign to make the prenup in a way that it's an absorbent amount of money?
Yeah, there was a rabbi in the Upper West said we should make it $1,000 a day. Where Willig said, and for some people, $150 a day is chump change. But for most people here, what would you think if you had an opportunity to keep a woman, just take a revenge against her for a year, or pay $50,000, and it adds up. Most people, $50,000 a year adds up, and it becomes real money. And therefore, they had a case that they ended recently this year. It was $350,000 because of a prenup. That's real money, and that does add up and pressures people. $250,000. But yeah. But the reason why Willig said absolutely not to $1,000 a day is because of get Musa. That's a big problem.
We want
to force him, according to the Meiri, according to the Rashba, according to the Ritzbah, ones Aydei Mamon is considered ones. There is a Rishon who maybe said otherwise. There's what to discuss, but we hold ones Aydei Mamon, forcing someone to give a penalty of money, forcing them, stealing their money, or pressuring them to give a lot of money is invalid. It makes it get invalid. So we don't want to do that.
Yeah. So even according to those who interpret Rabbi Willig's prenup as a fine, what's like the technical svara as to like what they see is halachically wrong with it?
Okay, good. Let's do two main things that they think are wrong. One thing is they think the guy didn't really agree with it. So this is very, very, very important. That's why I printed it out, and I want everybody to understand it. So Rabbi Elyashiv said the guy doesn't know what he's signing. He's signing on the dotted line just because. And he doesn't realize what it is. And of course, it's like kind of meaningless. And so he just does it by rote because everybody else does. So people just sign and they don't know what they're doing. So it's not valid. It's not binding. We're just forcing him to give a get. That's a shalom, but they get divorced. So I think that point is not, I don't think, a halachic problem. I think that's just a solvable, simple solution. Everybody here, just read it. And if somebody gives you a paper to sign, it's only one paragraph that you really need to read. It's where it says about the $150. And someone could tell you about it. And I think it's bad practice for a rabbi at the wedding when they're, they call the wedding for 4 o'clock, and then at 7 o'clock the rabbi comes in with a piece of paper and says to the chatan, you got to sign here on the dotted line. It's very bad practice because, that's pressure on the husband. He's probably not reading it at that time. He's probably not in the state of mind to read it. What you should do is, before the wedding, tell him of what the prenup means. And I should explain to him, Chazak Baruch, okay, everybody, you can take a break to get something to eat. So that's why
we'll keep talking, but we'll tell stories.
I think it's very important that the husbands know what it means. So it shouldn't be a smachta because he doesn't understand it. He doesn't know what he's signing on for. So I'm trying to explain it today so we know what the prenup is. He agrees to pay $150 a day as support to his wife as long as they didn't give a get and they're not living in the same home. If they're not living in the same home, at that point, it means he's allowed to go to the Beit Din and say, I want shalom bayit, I want to have therapy. That's fine. But at some point, when the Beit Din says things have broken down, there is no repair, the marriage is dead, the Beit Din is going to say, at this point and on, he's going to have to pay $150 a day unless he gives her a get. Why is he not giving her a get? If there's no good reason, no real reason, the Beit Din is going to say $150. So then, $150 adds up. That's what this means. If someone understands it, good. If someone doesn't understand it, they think this is hocus pocus or it's meaningless, don't sign it. That's what I would definitely say. Another argument is the get musa issue, and that has to do with Rabbi Sternbuch looked at it as a knas. Since he says it's a knas, it's a penalty, so therefore it's a problem according to the Rashba. It makes the children mamzerim. I don't think that's true. First of all, because Rov, let's say Rishonim, Achronim really hold like the Tashbates, but besides that, it's not a penalty at all. As Rabbi Djavaheri said, first things first, they wanted to give Rabbi Sherma, who reads English, his first language is English, an economist's paper on the prenup, why they picked $150, and he wouldn't read it. The $150 was made with thorough research on how much it cost, living costs for Jews, Orthodox Jews in this area, New York. And so that, if you look at it as mizonot, as food, as support, so then there's nothing, that's not a get mu'usah. But those are the reasons some people are against it, and there is the yeshivish world that's against it. There are some, Rabbi Lebhar, there are some in Rabbanim, even in this yeshiva, who are against it. I think sometimes it's just political reasons. We don't want to do things that are too modern, which I think is a mistake. But I think the real reasons are, okay, they're worried about this halacha issue versus that halacha issue, and I think there are real solutions, and I think halachic correct answers, like Chon Vadia thought 30 years ago, I think are still true. I believe quoted Rabbi Aluf as well as agreeing with it.
I'll jump in before David's question.
Yeah.
When I was getting married, I signed my prenup with my wife and the Schechter at the window at the entrance of the Gluck Beit Midrash. And it was like between Seder, like my wife came, whatever, to sign the prenup with Rav Schechter, was our Mesader Kiddushin. And I just like scribbled my name. And Rav Schechter was like, no, take it seriously. Like, this is a real deal. It's not a joke. You should take it seriously. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Let's rattle through the last ones. I'll answer in 30 seconds. Let's go through the last ones, and I'll take any general questions from everybody. Let's just do the list. Go for it.
Is the system fair to men? And are they automatically assumed to be a refuser? What if they legitimately love her?
So it simply said, Rabbi Willig does have a two-sided prenup that really in the state of California would be required. But Rabbi Willig doesn't want to be so maverick and leave the mold of the ketubah, which is one-sided. So really Rabbi Willig's preference is to do a one-sided prenup, but if somebody says, I'm only going to sign a prenup if I do a two-sided one, that's Beseder Gamur. Unfortunately, I only had the privilege of being Mesader Kiddushin for lawyers, and it is the most annoying thing to explain to a lawyer that he doesn't know what he's talking about. When he says, Rabbi, this thing is not binding in the state of California, I'm like, dude, you are an attorney, you just became an attorney. Professors of law helped craft this in a way that it does work in the state of California. And it does work in the USA, and it's not under duress. And we try our best to not use it unless we need to, but theoretically we could. In terms of maligning the husband and being unfair to him, nobody ever said that the pressure is to give a get. If you read the prenup clearly, the pressure is to come to Beit Din to have a hearing called a get timing dispute to determine whether or not a get should even be given. And then we can discuss the giving of a get. But really, the whole prenup is premised on should the marriage have fallen apart to the point that they're no longer living together and it's irreparable, then we can have a meeting to determine if a get should be given. And if you refuse to come to the meeting, we're going to get you. That's also not even a knas, a self-imposed penalty on the get. It's a self-imposed penalty on coming to Beit Din. You're supposed to come to Beit Din. That's a halacha. If you ever get a summons in the mail for a Beit Din, you must respond to it. Either that I'm going to come or that I'm going to another Beit Din. But you can't ignore it. And this is the same thing. You sign an arbitration agreement that is binding in the United States of America and in halacha.
So I think the system is not I don't think it's totally unfair to men. I think when it comes to these things, the man is allowed to claim, I want shalom bayit, I love my wife and I don't want to divorce her. But the Beit Din will only give it a certain amount of time and space before it looks like it's a sham and a lie, where if the marriage is totally broken down and their therapy is not working and she tried and they're not getting along together, they're not living in the same house, so it's not a matter of being unfair to the man. If the woman says, I'm just disgusted by this guy, I can't live with her, I can't live with him, and I can't be around him, and so at some point, the guy, as much as he loves her, it's been 5 years and not living in the same house, and she's already moving on with her life. She just wants to be able to get remarried. That's already a time that the guy should say, you know what, wake up and smell the coffee. He needs to move on with his life. And then he is supposed to give a get, even if he's not absolutely obligated to give it. So I don't think it's unfair against men. It depends on the situation. The Beit Din there does listen to, of course, both sides. Just
to keep going without the... In terms of custody, the prenup has an optional piece about custody. That's a big mistake. Everyone who signs the prenup should sign on that the Beit Din should have jurisdiction on custody as well. Rabbi Rapp, who takes the prenup cases usually in the Beit Din, of America is the one who has to clean up the mess that's left when they don't check off the box in terms of custody, because then you have to convince them to figure it out. Whereas if he already has jurisdiction, it's a lot easier for him.
Custody battles are often the worst, ugliest, longest. So if you do it through a Beit Din, it's much faster and simpler and easier. Looking out for what's best for the kids.
Post facto,
it happens to be 98% of the case in secular court too. 98% of the cases the woman wins. The Chas v'Shalom shouldn't get married and try to have kids and then have a messy divorce and think you're going to win the kids. It's not usually the case, but that's just reality of American life and Jews here.
Yeah, and in terms of what to do in the moment, it requires Kovid Rosh if you're in such a situation to discuss. Not just with therapists, not just with attorneys, but to speak with Rabbanim who spend much of their time behind the scenes dealing with these issues and have experience and can guide you properly, hopefully, in terms of what the best practice is. You should make sure your prenup is notarized, and that way nobody can contest it, depending on the state you're in. That also makes a difference. And in terms of being mandatory, of course it should be mandatory.
Everybody sign one?
Of course it should be mandatory.
Last question. Should everybody sign?
Now,
so I believe it should be optional that everybody. I think it's a good thing, and I highly encourage everybody to do it. I did it myself. I think everybody should do it, but it shouldn't be mandatory. Once it becomes mandatory, I'm afraid people are going to sign it without understanding it, and people are going to feel they're pressured at the wedding to have to sign the piece of paper. If there's a fight between the two families, the in-laws or whatever, the father-in-law doesn't want it. They say they think they're black hat, and this doesn't fly for them. So to me, it's not worth losing a marriage or engagement over. But I do think it's a good thing, and I think I recommend it because it solves problems. It solves problems. For the 150 agunot case we have every year, this will turn it to zero. So that's why I think it's a very, very positive thing.
I don't think you should lose a marriage over it. I think you should pick one of the alternative versions if that will make the rabbis more comfortable. But you should lose the Misader Kiddushin over it. Therefore, I refuse. I refuse the Misader Kiddushin for somebody. If they're not willing to sign a prenup. I know Rabbi Willig sometimes is a little more lenient than that, but you don't need me to be your Misader Kiddushin. I'm not taking the responsibility when I'm going to be the one writing the get afterwards also. I'd rather not write the get. I'd rather you find someone else to get you married and take the responsibility.
Okay. Let's take some questions. If we have any last messages.
Just one more anecdote. Rabbi Reese, who was very involved in creating Aura and the promulgating of the prenup media and marketing, Rabbi Yonah Reese, who's now the Av Beit Din in Chicago, after Rabbi Gedalia Dov Schwartz, Rabbi Reese tells a story about how there was once upon a time a person who worked for Ora, the organization for resolving agunot, and at his wedding, they signed the prenup, Be'er V'Hadar, they put it on the microphone, everyone heard about it, and they read it to everybody, I promised that all these things. It was a beautiful moment. And then a few years later, the guy's marriage broke down, and his attorney told him, maybe you want to consider not giving your wife a get until you get what you want. And he thought about it, and he agreed with the attorney.
Oh no!
You could be Yochanan Kohen Gadol in the Beit HaMikdash and still become an Apikoros. Just because what we're saying is Emet La'amito, and you hear it now, doesn't mean that it'll always feel that way. When people are through the emotional roller coaster of a horrible marriage, and they are so filled with vitriol and acrimony for their spouse, they can think and do anything. And the best way to tame yourself and others, not you, but the guy next to you, not you either, but the guy who is also going to get married and he's going to ask, did you sign this thing? And his marriage will actually need it. It'll be easier for him to sign it if you also signed it. So Be'ezrat Hashem, I know the room is filled with B'nai Aliyah who are sterling midot. But you also know people, and Chas v'Shalom, you might yourselves be in a situation where you will get divorced. And the best way to encourage others, if the rabbis aren't going to mandate it, is from the grassroots, for people to feel comfortable signing this, and it shouldn't be foreign to them. And that's really our goal here, is to introduce the idea. You're learning Masechet Ketubot. It couldn't be more apropos. We're not just being Mevatel Torah for this topic, but it's relevant. It's relevant to the limud also. But the idea is that if you hear people say yes prenup, you understand where they're coming from. If you hear people say no prenup, you understand where they're coming from, and you understand that they're wrong. Baruch Adonai Le'olam.
I want to take some questions. Joey, did you have a question? Someone have any questions? Judah, question. Yeah, question.
So if a prenup is signed, the two parties just have to go to Beit Din and just write up again, and that's it, they're done?
No. They go to Beit Din, and they're allowed to say, I think we should stay married, or I think we should get divorced. They're allowed to and explain all the cases. I have a problem because I want more custody, or I want this money. The Beit Din will hear the different claims, and they'll break it up, and they'll figure it out. They're not going to just, the arbitration doesn't mean automatically they're giving a get, not at all.
I know.
It just means that they have to go to the Beit Din. If they have a problem, so what you're supposed to do, you sit with the problem, you're supposed to go to Beit Din, they're going to help you figure it out. That's what the Beit Din. The Beit Din does not always give a get.
Yeah.
Does not always it ends that way.
The point is that if the husband is playing games and he knows he has no claim, that there's he won't necessarily sign up for that meeting. They should just go straight to the get because he has nothing to say.
There's two different, right. If he really wants Shalom Bayit and they end up working it out, beautiful. That's the best. I hope everybody in this room has a beautiful marriage and 0 divorces. And it shouldn't be that divorce is a terrible thing. But sometimes when the Beit Din sees he's either lying or just the Beit Din, he says he doesn't like his wife anymore. He's out of love with his wife. That happens. So then we need to move away. We need to move to the next step again.
How long has Willig's prenup been like mainstream, and has the value of the amount of money that needs to be given per day increased at some point, or is there like an idea that it should increase?
It's been promoted since the 90s, but not as like public. I would say until Ora came around. In the last 15 years, they became a lot more popular. More people use it. Tens of thousands, I think more than 10,000 people have signed and use it, and has saved thousands of cases just from the knowledge of having a prenup. And the guy doesn't want to have to pay a boatload of money. He ends up giving a get at the time when the marriage is totally broken. It was getting even to messy 10-year, 20-year agunah cases. So it's been around for a long time. I forgot what the other question was. The number has changed. It started at $50, went up to $100, and then now $150. So that number has changed. In Israel, it's $75. Standard of living there is cheaper. So you can get away with $75 a day for rent and food. Mark, you want to close it? You have any good questions to end us off with?
Not really.
No? Okay, any else? David?
What if you're not planning on living in New York, let's just say?
Good.
USA or Israel? Somewhere else.
Somewhere else. Like you're not sure which Beit Din to choose, what city, what country.
So the answer is you could pick a Beit Din that you agree on now, and if it comes later, and you both agree you want to pick a different Beit Din, you can write a different shtar to make that possible to pick a different Beit Din. But it's so helpful to have a Beit Din. And even if things get messy later, and usually when things get messy, they don't agree on anything. They don't see eye to eye. So at that point, if they say, oh, we agreed to this Beit Din, but that Beit Din is in a different country, we don't live there, they can both agree, and that will be binding. We both agree not to go to that Beit Din we agreed on, but we both have to agree somewhere else. Fine, that's no problem.
Or the Beit Din can recommend another Beit Din.
The Beit Din could recommend somewhere else. Yeah, that's no problem.
The point is, if you pick your local shul rabbi, he's probably not going to be around in 10, 20 years.
A Beit Din has a longer life.
But a well-known, reputable Beit Din that has been around for a century and can continue with the right resources, has the resources to continue easily, is a better investment, FDIC insured in a sense.
Yes.
Sorry if you already answered this, but does a Beit Din have a most favorable custody split with men or no?
I can't say from experience. I have no experience in this. In the secular court, they're very, very, I would say, pro the woman. The woman almost always, 98% in secular court, the woman wins the custody, not the man. In Beit Din, their operating principle is the marit, that we do whatever's best for the kids. Sometimes they even have psychologists on the board. They usually do. Dr. Pelkowitz used to be on it, and ask the kids and talk to them, psychologists, talking to the kids to figuring out what's best, which home to be best in would be best for them. So I can't say in general what the Beit Din does. I think they're trying to figure out what's best for the kids. I think it probably happens to be majority of the time it goes to the woman. That most of the custody, yeah.
Why is there so much emphasis on Rashba's opinion? He's like a single opinion on all these Rishonim.
Okay, because he's the one who really discussed it. There was a Rabbi Najjar, there was a Rabbi Maimon that discussed this, and he wrote a tshuva to the Rashba that if self-imposed knas should be valid for a get, and the Rashba wrote and that's why it became. That's a tshuva to the Tashbetz. So the Rashba's tshuva is quoting the Darkei Moshe and Beit Yosef. Basically, it's not in Rif Rambam, it's not in the Gemara, it's not in Rif Rambam or Rosh. And the Rashba, the Beit Yosef in his introduction writes, the dad of the Rashba is like that Karov HaRishonim. He was like one of the greatest Rishonim. What he writes is like very, very powerful. So there's a lot more to say about the Rashba and the Tashbetz on this. But the reason we keep quoting him is because he wrote the tshuva on this topic that like is landmark and it's quoted in the Shulchan Aruch in the Beit Yosef, and that's why it's very important. Nobody else wrote so much about it. Tashbetz wrote a lot of tshuvot about it.
If you want to start a movement about another one of the Rishonim and his philosophy and his halakha, the Rashba is so the king. Maran has so many juicy lishonot about how the Rashba, Svarat HaRashba, Filu Be'elef Lo Batel, or Rav Manhig Posek Ador, all these great lishonot that the Maran has for the Rashba.
Any last question? We're going to wrap it up. We'll do Birkat Hamazon. Chazak u'baruch.
Anthony, you should be zocher to have a lifelong, healthy marriage, building dorei dorot of lomdei Torah, ohavei Hashem, yirei Hashem, with midot tovot, and should Be'ezrat Hashem help finish off the goof of all the neshamot. Mashiach should come very soon.
Amen. And this only shows your wife to be, how much you love her. That I'm getting into a marriage that's serious. That if chas v'shalom something were to break down completely, I love you so much that if I realize I can't get you, I'll do everything in the world, send you flowers and do everything I can to be able to try to get you back. But if it doesn't work, eventually I realize you want out, I'll give you a get. That's what this says. It says, I'm serious about this and I appreciate you and respect you. And that's what that means. It means a marriage that's solid from the very beginning. So it doesn't mean we talk about nasty, bad divorce things before we're married. Hopefully everybody in this room will be totally irrelevant. No one should get divorced. They should have a happy, healthy marriage, as Rabbi Djavaheri said. That's the bracha. Yeah. But it means from the beginning, I'm serious and I'm happy to work with somebody who I respect. Yeah. Postscript.
should make more women aware of this because I feel like they should.
Okay, the woman, I'm all for that.
When we were in college, there was Aura was very strong on campus, and they had posters everywhere. Friends don't let friends get married without a halachic prenup. So much so that the Purdish field that year, until 2015, was like all about the prenup. So it's really just there are things come in waves. People emphasize different things at different times. You know, all it takes is a few guys and girls to raise awareness again on campus, and then people will be more aware. And also shul rabbis to raise awareness and speak about these things more publicly.
We're going to take the question privately. Chazak Baruch. Okay, we're going to do this question. We're going to do Birkat Hamazon. We're going to do Birkat Hamazon.